we start looking at the BIM Execution Plan. You should be familiar with the idea of BIM Execution Plan by now. You have all read all the documents and the standards of PAS 1192 and British Standard 1192. Looking at this particular document here in the PAS 1192 schema. What's the idea? The idea is that BIM execution plans are actually those moments in the workflow of your BIM supported project where a project team responds to an EIR formulated by an owner, formulated by a client. These are actually information that model the aspects of the process that the team is promising to set up if they get awarded the contract. Okay? It's a key document for level 2 building information modeling, we know that. Who fills it in? Well, generally the responsibility of filling this document in lies with somebody that has a lot of relationship in the supply chain, so it will make sense for it to be a general contractor or a designer or somebody that has a number of connections and contractual relationship with others. So it's whoever leads the design and build team. Okay. So we can say that it's a tier 1 leader that does that. What is the purpose of this document? Well, it's an initial document that sets out the ability of a team and the planned response to a team to deliver on the employer information requirement that was set up by a client. Therefore, it naturally evolves. So, as a clarity of relationship between the team and the client evolves, so should the BIM execution plan. And intrinsically, because it's responding to a brief, a BIM execution plan does not necessarily lead to a contract, right? So you are a developer, a designer team. You get in touch with another, with all the stakeholders on your team, consult on an employer information request brief, and see what are the options of you carrying out that required workflows, and bring this into a documentation in a BIM execution plan. Send this plan to a client that might decide to give the contract to somebody else, right? So naturally, the amount of resources that you are prepared to put in this BIM execution plan are limited because you are investing in your ability to deliver on some expectation without knowing whether you will win the contract. Does it make sense? So, to what extent are you prepared to invest in making a really clever and sophisticated BIM execution plan? Well, only limited, only to some limited extent, reasonably, because of course carrying this out to full development would take money and talks and meetings and conversation, right? So you want to develop this in several stages, because this is a complex document that contains all sorts of information associated with the project and the way in which people are going to collaborate. So project scope, description, key stakeholders, personnel, the key performance indicators that we're going to use to evaluate the quality of all of this, how we are actually coming together, and what standards are we using in terms of modeling, what type of protocols are we going to agree and use, and so on, units and such. But a lot of information comes at this soft end of the collaborative working that might seem trivial, but actually takes a lot of negotiation to clarify. What is the expertise of your team? Are they actually really physically capable of integrating information seamlessly? Do we have all this custom application? Have we tested the fact that our softwares are capable of interoperating everything amongst themselves, and so on and so forth? So a lot of this takes a lot of negotiation, a lot of work. Does it make sense to carry out all of these fine level of detail at early stages? Maybe not. So what we find ourselves is in a social environment where there is a pre-contract BIM execution plan that then gets revised after the contract is awarded. So only the winning team gets around the table again and clarifies what are all these fine-tuning aspects of a BIM execution plan, and then submits it to the employer to make sure that this is actually still compatible with the idea of them winning the bid, whether it solves all the expectations that the client has. At this stage, it makes sense also to include in your workflows and in your agreements and in your contract some levels of BIM execution planning reviews. So maybe you will see whether the information, the plan that you have put in at this early stage needs some development further down the line. In accordance to PAS 1192, the BIM execution plan will enable the employer to understand what the contractual implications are of the proposition of any team that works for them. Okay. And it allows them to see if there is room for negotiation and improvement on the interaction that is planned to be happening between employer and team. We've already mentioned this need of a review just before signing the final contract. Okay, so there is a kind of a fluctuation time between the time where the client receives all the proposals and the actual signature of a contract, where there is a moment for the clients and the team to review these contents. So these are mandated content that should be in your BIM execution planning document. The scope and BIM related goals, organizational roles, the required and defined staffing levels, the process that is going to happen, what type of information exchange is going to happen throughout the different stages, how do we connect the building information modeling data that we are dealing with at design stage with the transformation that this data needs to undertake before it goes through facility management and operations. So what type of collaboration and what procedures will be needed at edit stages to achieve this? Ideally also information about quality assurance procedures. So how do we make sure that throughout the development of all these massive data set that we know of, we constantly keep an eye on the fact that this is correct data and that we are following a good process that we can also improve on the next iteration of the delivery. Fine details as well as the technology infrastructure requirements. We have seen last week the concept of a common data environment, so how do we set that up? How do we make that happen? And also, how do we break down the models so that that clever classification of different naming convention and breakdown of the system allows you to bring together all these different contributions for different purposes. What deliverables are available at what stage, and also what are the contracts that occur between the client and the team, or maybe the tier one, the main contractor, and also what possible contracts are available between the main contractor and subcontractors. Now, that's a document, okay? That's a Word format document, or any document that would contain all that information. It is now possible to develop some of that through standard templates that are available. You have seen probably last week what is offered by the digital BIM toolkit by the MBS. But a written document will have a hard time to specify all of this information. So together with a BIM, you have a number of appendices that try to make this information much more editable, much more clear, much more flexible, and transparent by using a number of schematic diagrams and representation and annexes and tables and all sorts of documents that make this easy to read from all the stakeholders. Because these are quite crucial bits of information. They are contractually enforced, so getting information wrong in terms of your deadlines or whether you fall in one of these tables or not makes a big difference from the endeavor that any parts of the contractual supply chain needs to consider. So it is important that these are easily read. I hope to be able to go very quickly through this idea once again so that it's finally cemented for everybody. This all starts from the information that the employer wants, given previous experiences of how they want to improve on the process. And then the BIM execution plan is the response of a design team to this. It is supported by an MIDP, which is a Master Information Delivery Plan, that is the sum of all those documents that we've seen that document, that detail who's doing what and when. It is covering all stages or relevant stages of the information, starting from the inception and design of your process up to design and construction. It is defining as well as how the information is expected to grow throughout the different stages. So what are the expected levels of information that we mature as we go on from a stage to the next. And also it mandates and defines what is the contractual information at specific exchange points that are the data drops that we've discussed in the past. 1, 2, 6. I don't know why some people felt the need to define to draw a smiley face here, because this never happens. The client cannot possibly be happy after all that. That's a lot of headaches. So, but ideally that's what we want. So I think it's important to remind ourselves that all of this we're doing because we're expecting to deliver a facility which will be leveraging the knowledge of the whole process for operation, okay? So if you miss this crucial long-term objective, you might as well do a little BIM and do some little automation in your office and forget level 2. PAS 1192 Part 2 is at the core of this process because this mandates what the dynamics are of the capital development processes. And again, if you have not read that document, I urge you now to read this tonight. The focus on electronic-oriented information is mandated in PAS 1192 Part 2. What we are going to see next is how do we actually enforce a mechanism for all the different players to be able to collaborate in such an environment with try to resolve all the interoperability issues that we might have.